What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are continuing on our hacking lab series, and what we're going to do today is we're actually going to stand up our first domain controller, or DC. And the reason we're going to do this is because that will run the entire infrastructure. So this is the brain. Think of it as the brain of your domain controller. So first thing we got to do is we got to log in. Okay. And now you see I have one here. I'm going to actually turn that off. And the reason I'm going to turn it off is because I don't want it to interfere. The reason I have it on at all, and I'll turn it back on when we get closer, is because when you're setting these up, there are going to be a lot of steps, and it's going to, at the very end, need to reboot and reset everything up and install a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to skip to the final piece for you guys, so that way you're not sitting here waiting for me to figure it out, right? Or not figure it out, but waiting for it to install. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we did is we have our Proxmox stood up. We're on the server. We've done this so far. This whole entire build is next to nothing in cost. We're standing everything up. You can see here, we got an Ubuntu, we got a Windows, and we've got a DC. Now this Ubuntu, you notice the icon's different. This icon is a template, meaning I can just clone VMs from it. I wanted to do that, so I have Linux machines. The Linux machines I'm going to use as attack machines eventually. But the first thing is, the biggest thing is we need a domain controller. And if you don't know, a domain controller can be on-prem. It can be Entra ID, which is your, your Azure Active Directory. You can have all kinds of them. And hopefully, okay, it just stayed on. That's fine. We'll just keep it on. It doesn't matter. You can see it's up. So you can have all cloud-based Active Directory or access control, whatever. This whole lab is offline, meaning it never will connect to the internet. So that is why it's never even on a network that can connect to the internet. It's offline, off network, everything. So that's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. If you guys are doing it cloud-based, that's fine. The premise is the same. But I recommend you do this because this is how most infrastructures are built, except for startups or companies that have been built in the last 5-10 years, something like that. They might have some cloud focused IAM, stuff like that, but the majority of people run on domain controllers. Whether they are cloud-based or not is still, they're still domain controllers. So got that out of the way. If you guys like this content, if you guys are enjoying it, hit that like button, hit that sub button, because we are going to build this lab tenfold. It's going to be awesome. So first thing we need to do is we need to actually go to my data center here. And you can see I have an ISO template. I've added two. I've added a Windows 11 and I've added this server evaluation version. So I will put a link in where I did it. It's just on Microsoft, but I got the server evaluation for Windows Server 2019, and that's what we're going to make the VM out of. So download that Windows Server version, the evaluation edition. It gives you 180 days free without having to use a Windows license key, anything like that. You go in here, you upload it. So I would just upload. I've already done that. It's right here. Now, once we have it uploaded, all we have to do is come over here and we can just stand up a new, we can stand up a new one. So you can see if we go to right here, create a VM, we'll create a new one. We'll call this DC2. Now, I understand this isn't actually we're not going to have two DCs. Most companies, just for your own information, do have multiple DCs and they replicate with each other, meaning they just sit there and they communicate. If I make a change on one, it automatically replicates to the other. We're not going to do that here because I'm not super worried. If my DC shuts down or breaks or whatever, if it breaks or whatever, I'll just stand a new one up. I'm not that worried about it. And then I'll just join the computers back to a new domain. So you can see VM ID is 103. So Proxmox is a little bit different than VMware, where you can't actually put like folders and stuff here. Unfortunately, it's kind of annoying, but we're going to name it DC02, and you can name it whatever you want, but that's just a normal naming convention. Okay. The ISO image, we're going to use this Windows 11 refresh. Okay. We want to change this to Microsoft Windows, you can see, and we're going to say next, the system, storage, okay. We'll go ahead and add, you can add whatever you want. I'll make it 100. It doesn't need to be that big, but I have a lot of storage, so I'm not super worried about the storage. Sockets, we'll go ahead and make it 4 cores. Doesn't need to be crazy. I'm going to take this one down, so I'm not going to keep it. The memory's fine at 4096. And then there you go. Okay, so then you hit finish, and then you can see this is what it'll look like when it's actually spun up. But here is actual VM 103, and you can see if I go to summary, and where's that? There we go. It changed to DCO2. That's what I was waiting for. So now it's actually created. I can start it up. When it actually starts, it will run. There'll be a couple issues. You see that how it said start issue here. You have to go to hardware, and you have to get rid of. Where is it? Maybe it's not under hardware. What was it under? Options. That's what it was under. KVM virtualization. Disable that. And then you can spin it back up. And now when it spins back up, you'll see it may say push a button to boot from disk. You have to push a button to boot from disk, or you have to go change the boot menu and say only boot from a disk, whatever. But if you just, so see how it says press any button to boot from DVD or thing? I had to do that, right? If you don't do that, then basically it's not booting from the ISO file. If you don't understand what that means, it means the file that we upload is the ISO file, and that ISO file is actually acting as a DVD or a USB boot drive, basically. So we're putting in a DVD to install it. That's what it's acting like. That's what the computer recognizes it as. So we have to tell the computer boot from DVD. If you don't, it's just going to try and load straight to the operating system. Well, there's no operating system, so it's not going to run. So you might get stuck in a constant loop if that happens, where you're going, I don't know why this isn't working. That's why it's not working. Just FYI. So now you see it's spinning up, and then we have DCO2. Now we could just keep this here, honestly, the DCO2, and we could just replicate it, meaning we could have it just sit there and sync with the other one once we actually get it set up. Let me know what you guys want to do. I don't think we really want to waste the hardware, meaning like I don't want to waste the CPU cores or the RAM, because the more RAM and CPUs we have, the more we can actually just build more VMs that are more realistic. Realistically, if, like I said, if one of the whole point of replication is so that if DC01 goes down, I can still communicate. Because what you guys need to understand with DCs is if I create a user account in a DC, and then I try to log into one of the machines in the lab, I'm going to be using the account that is associated with the DC. If I don't have an account, or if the DC is offline, I can no longer log into that machine using that account. I'm not super worried about that. I'll just create a new DC if need be. But in a real environment, you don't want that to happen, because then nobody could work, right? Okay, so this is Windows Server 2019. We're going to choose English. Install now. And by the way, if you don't know, you can also take these ISO files, not this specific one, but because this is 2019, but you can take ISO files and you can make repair disks. That's why it said repair. And if you don't know, those are also extremely useful to boot in, and you can change local admin passwords and things like that. So it's actually a kind of twofold, really nice thing to have in your repertoire. I recommend, if you've never used one to do physical attacks, you probably should, because no matter what the machine is, I can get past your login, right? Now, there's other ways to do it too. Just keep that in mind. So that there's no just permanently preventing it, but that's why BitLocker is automatically in Windows 11. I believe it's Windows 11. Someone correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong. So now, once this setup is starting, we're going to go ahead and get it booted up. And then when it's done, that's when it'll look like this, right? And this is has already been promoted to a domain controller and everything. This has a domain. The domain is Stuffy24. We're going to create a new domain. We'll name it Stuffy2224 because that's my some of my other accounts. But this one's going to be shut off. So in the future videos, when you see Stuffy24, that's going to be our domain. What that means is Stuffy24.com is our domain name. We're not going to have that registered. It's not going to, you can't go to the site. There's nothing like that. I don't know what that site is, so don't go to it. I have no idea what it is. If you do go to it, that's on you if something bad happens. I have no idea what that site is, if it's even a real site. But so this will go ahead and boot up. When it's done booting up, we'll go ahead and jump into the next section. Okay, welcome back. So now it's asking us, which one do we want to be on? Do we want to be on Windows Standard Evaluation or Standard Evaluation Desktop Experience? Now, I want to do Desktop Experience. The reason is I want it to be easy for you guys. You can do all of this command line. It uses a lot less resources. So if you feel comfortable with the command line, then feel free. If you guys want to see me do it command line, let me know in the comments below and I'll make you a command line one. It'll be the server will require a lot less hardware. So let me know if that's how you want to go, because you can do a whole domain controller without ever seeing a GUI or interface or anything. So let me know if that's what you want to do, but we're going to do Desktop Experience so that we actually see what we're clicking on, what we're doing, all of that stuff, and we're not just doing it from command line. But if you guys are using something like AWS or don't have as many resources as this server or anything like that, then you can absolutely do just command line, right? Okay, so then here it's asking us if we accept the terms. We do. And then it says here, do you want to upgrade, install Windows, and keep files, or custom install Windows only? This says advanced, but if you look, the files and settings applications aren't moved to Windows. This is a totally new install is what they're saying. That's what we want. We want a totally new install. We want to go ahead and select the only drive that's there. And it's 100 gigs because that's what we selected, right? We're going to say, hey, go ahead. The reason you do totally new install is because if you already have a Microsoft account or something, then that's where you want to be careful, because if you don't, or if you do already have one, then you won't be able to use it here. It won't import your settings or anything like that. I would not recommend using an actual Microsoft account to set this up. You can if you want, but typically that's going to have its own problems because it's going to import everything you've done with Microsoft in the past. It's going to have all your saves, all that stuff. So now this is going to install Windows, copying Windows files, blah, blah, getting ready for installation, installation features, installation updates, all that stuff. When it's finished, it'll reboot the server, or it should, I believe, and then we'll come back up and we'll be on this screen right here. And then that's where we'll come back, and then we'll actually go ahead and get it stood up. All right, welcome back, guys. So it went ahead and installed, and then it restarted, and it comes up to this, right? So this is the default administrator account. So just for best security practices, so you guys know, you will want to change this default administrator account almost instantly. Now, I'm not going to change mine. You may say, well, that's not best security. You just told us. I get it, okay? But my system, my entire hacking lab is offline, will never be online. Unless you're physically in my location, you're never going to get access to it. So I don't care about that. But just FYI, that should be one of the first things you do is change the administrator. The main reason I'm not is because I want it to stay that, so that even if I don't touch this lab for 2 years, I go somewhere, I come back, everything's back still at the default. I know that. So, all right. Now, I understand that in a real business enterprise system, there should be password vaults where you can actually save these. I'm just using the same password for every single account involved with my hacking lab. So that way I don't have to stress about trying to remember them. If you guys are doing this on any online, anything connected to the internet, anything like that, that's why I'm telling you guys this, because I'm not connecting this to the internet. I'm never going to connect it to the internet. It has absolutely no internet connection in any facet. So that's why I'm telling you. So we went ahead, we've got it spun up. You can see now we have a Windows 2019 server, right? You can see we're on DCO2, we're not on DCO1 anymore. We go ahead and hit boom, boom, Control-Alt-Delete it. It'll ask us to log in. And keep in mind right now, this is not a domain controller. This is just simply a server. So right now, we're just on a 2019 server. It's going to load up as our default local administrator, meaning this is not on a domain. This account is only local to this machine, meaning if I go over to this machine and try to log in with this account, it's not there, right? The domain controller will allow them to, so that I can log into the Windows machine using the same account as the DC account, as the same account as everything else. That's the point of domain controller. All right, so now, once it comes up, we will actually go ahead and take this server and promote it to a domain controller. Now, it can't be promoted to a domain controller until you install the Active Directory services. Okay, now, so that's what we're going to do next. The other piece to keep in mind is, and we'll talk about it as we get there, but when you're installing a domain controller, if it's the first domain controller, your domain controller needs DNS, okay? So with that, you can install DNS directly on the domain controller. That's what a lot of people do. And when I say a lot of people, that's what most places do. But the big takeaway is you will have to on this, and you'll see what I mean. And it's not the fastest thing in the world, but don't need it to be. Also, keep in mind, once you have this set up and you have everything hooked up the way you want, you can just RDP into these. You don't have to connect using the Proxmox console, because this is just a Windows machine. You have the IP, you have all that. You can just remote into it, right? Now you have to be on the network, right? But you'd have to know. Now the other piece that I did not show, but I showed it in the first video, so go back to the first video if you guys did not, is your domain controller has to have a static IP as well. So you need to set that static IP on your router. You have to set the IP on the router so that the domain controller has the same IP every single time. I did not do that with this one because I'm not going to keep this one as a domain controller. I'm going to change this to something else later. But you have to do that. If you don't do that, then basically you're going to be all your systems are going to be looking for the domain controller every time and be like, I don't know where it's at, right? So, and it puts a DNS entry in there for the domain controller. So you need to have the same IP every single time for the domain controller. So make sure you set a static IP for the domain controller. Make sure you do that. If you don't remember how, or you don't know how, go back to my last video, which is in the description, and it will show you how to do it. But keep in mind, it's only going to show you how to do it on my router. Whatever router you have is slightly different, however you do it. That's the only reason I get questions a lot, like, how do I port forward? How do I do this? Whatever. If it's with your router, I try not to give clear guidelines, clear instructions, because every single router is different. You need to look up your router, look up the manual, look up how your router does it, and do it that way. Because especially with home routers, you want to do it properly, right? You don't want to be just kind of winging it, because if you can wing it, but if you accidentally lock yourself out of your home router or something, or kick somebody off or whatever, if it's your home router, I don't know who's on it. If you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of iffy, right? Because it's not, luckily for me, this is completely a test. What I mean by that is it's a test hacking lab, meaning I have its own router, my own wireless router, my own everything. None of it is actually anything that would actually affect anything. So no one is connected to this except for me. All right, so now our server manager will pop up, and this is where we're going to manage this server. You'll see this on every time you log into a server on Windows, and you can see it's taking forever. But when it comes up, we're going to actually go ahead and install the domain controller tools. And once we install those, then we can promote it to a domain controller. Okay, so we're loaded up. This is our server manager. You guys will notice in this video I'm cutting and I'm skipping ahead a lot. It's just because there's so many times you have to install, load, do stuff like that. You don't need to watch it install. You can if you want, I guess, but you're going to watch your own install. So this is what it looks like, server dashboard. You can see on our local server, we really don't have anything going on. So we want to add roles and features, because we want to add the role of domain controller. Okay, so now we got the server manager up. You can see one service didn't start, not really worried about it, pretty typical. And you can see it says configure this local server. This is the server. We haven't added anything to it, so we're going to say add roles and features. We want to go ahead and, okay, thank you. We want to go ahead and add a feature. The feature we're going to add is Active Directory services, right? We want to add the role-based or feature-based installation, because we want to add a role and a feature, right? So we click next. Let's see. And we're not worried about a VDI. If you guys don't know about VDI is, feel free to research it, but that's not what we're doing here. You can do that on yours if you'd like to, but that's not what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to select the server. You may say, well, obviously this is the server, right? But there's times where you'll have multiple servers in here. So we're going to select that server from the server pool. And you can see ours is IP address 103. Okay. One thing you notice is the name of it. WinRS, blah, blah, blah. You want to change your computer name if you can. If you don't know how, you can go, and I don't know why I said if you can, because you can. But if you don't know how, you're going to go here, and you're just going to go to, let's see. And it's taking a while because it's the first time it's spun up. But you always want to change the computer name to whatever you're doing, whatever that computer is. You don't have to, though. The reason I say you don't have to is because once you install that domain controller, you're going to have a computer name. But I like to change it before that so that I recognize it. You guys feel free. But you can go to your system configuration. Or you can just go to my computer and right-click it and say properties, something like that. So you can go to like, and I type my, we'll see. Okay, there you go. This PC, right-click it. I did right-click it, by the way. Properties. So you can see here, that's not what I wanted. Is this still loading or is it stuck? I can't tell. And you'll notice on this video I skip forward a lot and cut and things like that. It's because you guys are watching it just sit here and load. And it's because I'm setting it up for the first time, right? I'm setting up new features, things like that. I don't want you to have to sit here and watch it just load. That doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, it doesn't help you to sit here and watch this thing load through, right? And you can see there's the destination server. Okay, so here is our control panel. So you can see right here, the name of it is computer name right here. WinRSO. You just change these settings and you can change the computer name. And then you see it's on work group. Leave it on work group for now because you don't have a domain to join. So leave it at work group. And you don't have to change the name right now. You can leave the name. But I like to change the name now so that I recognize this computer because as you see, I have DCO1 and DCO2 basically running the exact same thing, but I want to know the difference. Obviously, I can tell the difference here, but if I was looking at like a network monitoring tool or doing a scan or something, I wouldn't know the difference because they're coming up the same except for my computer name, right? I mean, I would know if I had the IP addresses saved, but all right, and we'll come back as soon as this thing loads. Okay, so now we loaded past the selection. We selected the server. Now you can see we're going to go ahead and install the Active Directory. So we're going to say Active Directory Domain Services. I do not want to install the certificate services or the federation services yet. Now, the reason I say yet is I don't know what we're going to do with this lab way down the road, but you can see it's going to pick all its dependencies. So we're going to say, yep, we want all the management tools, everything. Okay. File and storage services. It's already selected. I'm not going to deselect it because then it will uninstall and all that. But I am going to select DNS server. And that's because, again, you have to have a DNS server. And so this just knocks out two birds with one stone. I don't have to do it. So no static IP address was found on this computer. That's why I told you before, you have to have a static IP. We're going to say, okay, cool. Not super worried about it because, again, I'm not going to keep this server the way it is. I'm going to delete it and fix it. Now we'll say next. Okay, and then the features. So again, you can just go through and there's no features that you necessarily need. It selected them for you. We'll say next. Okay, next. And again, you could do Azure Active Directory if you wanted to. I would focus on AD for now if you don't understand it before you move to Azure, but that's just me. It's called Entra ID now. DNS server, just telling you things to know. right? Okay, and then you have the confirmation. This is where you're going to click install. Okay, I'm not going to click install because I don't want to, meaning I'm going to use this server for something completely different. So I'm going to leave this server up. I'll change the name of it here later. But you click install. It's going to run through its installation. Okay, and then once it runs through its installation, I'll show you guys a picture of what will actually come up. And the reason I'm going to show you guys a picture is because I don't want to actually, you know what? No, we'll just do it. We'll just do it. So we'll just run through it real fast. So I'll go ahead and click install. You guys go ahead and just wait a second, and then we'll go through it. So that way you see the full picture. I'm not leaving you guys out. Okay, so now we've got it completely installed. You can see it here. It's sitting here. It says feature installation. We can close this, and you can see now we have these additional features on here. So we can go to AD, Active Directory Services, and one thing you'll see when it loads is that this is not promoted to a domain, the primary domain controller. So you'll see that when it pops up here. And I actually thought it was going to restart when I installed this. It did not. But you can see configuration required for Active Directory domain services, meaning if you click here on more, and you can go to manage and do this as well, it'll say server tasks, post deployment configuration. So this is post deployment configuration. We need to promote this server to a domain controller. So we click here. We need to promote it. And this is where we get into the domain controller configuration wizard. So we're going to say add a new forest, because so the way this works is if I was standing up my actual DC02, I would add this to an existing domain, but I'm not going to use this as that. I'm going to show you guys how to stand up a completely new one. So we would go down here to add a new forest, right? Now we could add a domain to an existing forest. If you guys don't know about forests and trees and things like that, please go read Microsoft documentation or read about Active Directory and things like that. But basically a forest is a group of domains, okay? And the domain controller is going to handle all entities underneath it, but a forest could be multiple domains. So for instance, if you had stuffy.com, what if I wanted stuffy24.com, stuffy2224.com, whatever, but I want them all managed under one thing. That's where I could do this. So we're going to add a new forest, and you can see the root domain name. We're going to use stuffy, and I don't remember which one I did for the other one, so we're going to say stuffy2224.com. That's going to be our actual domain name, meaning every one of our machines is going to be managed under stuffy224.com. So we go to next, and you'll see it's going to actually walk you through some of these steps. It's going to kind of ask you some simple questions, and you can pretty much just go through this default configuration, but we're going to go ahead and go through it anyway. And then when this is completely all said and done, you guys on the next video will see that I actually am going to remove this, and what I'm going to do is actually set up a new server, and we'll do something else with it. So as this goes through the next configuration step, you can see the target server is still that WinRS whatever, because I did not change the name. And you can see here you need to have a DSRM password. This is directory services restore mode. So this is if we had to restore everything. You can see we have domain name servers, or domain name system, excuse me, DNS server. We want the DNS server on this. You don't have to do this, but I will tell you, it will make it very difficult if you try to do this without a DNS server. So we are going to set the DSRM password. The reason I say it's going to be very difficult is because none of your machines will know who to talk to without a DNS server, right? So now we set this up. We went ahead and set up that we want the domain controller to handle DNS. That's fine. Now, a delegation for this DNS server cannot be created because authoritative, well, doesn't matter. It's fine. We don't need to select it. NetBIOS name should auto-populate with Stuffy2224 because the NetBIOS name is just our domain name without the .com. So you'll see this NetBIOS will, so every one of your machines, when it connects to the domain, there you go. There's your NetBIOS name, Stuffy2224. We're going to go ahead and install. It's going to ask us what paths, meaning where do we want to save the databases for the actual domain controller. Default's fine. Doesn't matter. If you have it somewhere you specifically want to save it, feel free. Save it wherever you want. Review our options. This is actually going to be our script. So you can see this is all of our options. We could view the script, and the script's going to actually show us the commands that it's running to actually set all this up. I'm not going to do that. Prerequisite check. It should run through this prerequisite check, and it'll have a couple of like notifications basically. It'll say like they're informational. They'll say like, hey, by the way, hey, by the way. But if everything goes smoothly, it'll say, but the prerequisite check is successful, and therefore you can install this. And once I install this, then our domain controller is actually stood up. It will install, and then it'll restart the server and all that stuff. Then our domain controller stood up. So therefore, then we are good to go. And then I'm going to show you guys how to create your first account. Because one thing to keep in mind is, remember that administrator account we logged into at the beginning? When this restarts, your administrator account will be now the domain controller, administrator account. Meaning you can log on to every computer on the domain with that account now. So we'll go ahead and wait for these prereqs to come up. While we're waiting for those prereqs, we'll go ahead and get logged into our actual domain controller, because we're going to skip the actual install part, because this one's already stood up, and this one is the one that I actually have set up with Stuffy. So you see how it says Stuffy and then administrator? That's because this is the domain I'm logging into, and this is the account. So we're going to say log in with our password. Let that log in. We'll go back to DCO2. Okay, still doing the prereqs. Okay, so we're logged in. Now, for sake of time, I already have them open, and because last time I logged in, I had them open. You go to Start and type in ADUC, ADUC, which is Active Directory Users and Computers, or you can just type in Active Directory and go to Users and Computers. Okay, and now you'll see this, Stuffy.com. This is my domain, Stuffy.com, right? So we go here, and when we do that, here's the tree that it's built out. Let's go back and see if prereqs are done. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about with the information. It'll just give you some informational. Then it says prereqs checked and passed successfully. You click install. It'll install, restart your computer, all that jazz. We're not going to do any of that. I'm actually going to shut this bad boy down so that I can delete it, because I don't need to promote it to another one. Unplanned. All right. Now we'll go back to here. So now you can see I created this OU, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. But by default, you'll have built-in computers, domain controllers, managed service accounts, users, etc. If you go to users, you'll see in here administrator. That's the account that we use to log in, right? Now you'll see I created a new user, Stuffy. Okay. All I did to do that is go here, right-click, say new, and then I did user. And then I filled in the information, right? So I said new user, and I just filled in the first name, Stuffy, last name, Stuffy, login, Stuffy at Stuffy.com, cancel, right? Because I already made it. So that's the name. But what else I did was, if you look, I went here, I right-clicked, and I said new, and I said organizational unit, and I made an admin's organizational unit. Now, this is just a folder right now, but what we would do is we can actually put in here, and we'll do this later, we're not going to do this now, I just want you guys to get your first account made. We're going to put all of our admins in here, and we're going to have specific policies that control what those admins can do in here. So right now we are the administrator, but I'm going to turn this Stuffy into a global admin, and you can see I do that by simply saying, we'll go to properties, and you can see account. Whoops, I didn't mean to go to account. I meant to go to member of, and you can see enterprise admin. So I already am an admin. Now, what I can do is take this Stuffy account and just drag it over to admins. moving objects can prevent your existing system from working the way it was designed. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's because I moved an admin. Keep the default admin here, okay? Now, when I go in here, look, this is our user now. So what's the point of this? We can manage this separately, meaning we can apply policies to that admin account, what I can see, what I can do, what I can actually manipulate. And what we're going to do is go ahead and create an admins one, because that's where we're going to give all access and make them enterprise admins like myself, my Stuffy account. And then I'm going to go ahead and create another OU, which is going to be new organizational unit. And we're going to name it users. And we'll just name it employees, right? Because we're pretending we have a company here, right? So we'll name it employees. Now this one, we're going to actually create accounts here for regular users that don't have the same permissions as a regular admin, because when you are hacking, 90% of the accounts that you may get access to first are going to be regular users, and then we need to elevate to admins, right? So we need to set this up exactly like a real company would, which is we'll have our regular users, then we'll have our admins. You always want an admin just because you need to control stuff on here, right? You have the built-in admin, but again, usually that built-in admin is disabled and you have these admins. So this will get you your first Active Directory setup, your domain setup, all that stuff in a matter of an hour, and then everything's set up. Now we can start adding users, policies, like things like password policies, stuff like that. That's what we're going to edit next. On the next video, we're going to set up our OUs, our password policies, all of our group policies, all that stuff. We're going to set that stuff up. So then when we actually go to log into our first Windows machine, we can actually just join the domain with it. And then straight from there, boom, we actually have full access just like a regular user would at a real company. So let me know what you guys think. Hopefully this helps you guys, and hopefully you guys are following along and at least learning something. Thanks, guys.